Here are 6 moves you can make right now to prepare for the fantasy playoffs. Pick up Jordan Mason and Zonovan Knight, 2 running backs you guys could pick up right now to help you prepare for the playoffs. Jordan Mason has a lot of upside, and with Elijah Mitchell going down, he immediately saw himself splitting the backfield with Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey also dealing with an injury, and Jordan Mason actually looked pretty good. He had 5 yards per carry, and although he didn't really get a ton of volume yet, it looks like he will probably be, a split backfield similar to what we saw with Elijah Mitchell, paired with the upside of really being a handcuff for McCaffrey at this point because the running backs in San Francisco are getting really thin. And Mason actually looked really quick, and he could be electric and a guy who could break off some big runs. So he's got some upside here. And Zonovan Knight, also go pick him up. Another player who has like this handcuff upside. We saw him get a ton of touches in the absence of Michael Carter. So another player with big upside. I do believe Michael Carter will be returning this week, or at least he could, but it's still crucial. You need to stash this guy to see what his role is, even if Michael Carter is still in, and he has that upside of Michael Carter potentially getting re-injured, and he has handcuff upside.
So that brings us to our quarterbacks that we like for the playoff push, and these are going to be streamers that you can probably get off your waiver wire. So our first one's going to be Jimmy G, and Jimmy G has been pretty consistent this entire season. I mean, he has a couple of games where he's around 15 points, but the majority of his games are around 22, 21, 20, 21, and then he has the one game of around 33. So I think if you need someone that's just consistently going to get you 20 to 25 points with the chance of a 30-point game, I think Jimmy G is a good guy for that. He has a great schedule, so he plays Miami this week, which should be a high-scoring affair. Miami's defense is okay, but they do allow points, so he should be able to put them up there. He gets Tampa Bay next week, which isn't great, but it's not the worst matchup. And then in your playoffs, you get Seattle, Washington, and the Raiders for championship week, which is probably one of the better schedules for the playoffs, especially of players that are available on your waiver. So I would definitely look for him. And so for Mike White, he just started his first game this season last week, and he threw for 303 touchdowns, which is amazing. That's what we wanted to see out of the Jets all year. And his remaining schedule, Minnesota this week, which is a pretty good matchup, should be decently high scoring. He gets Buffalo next week, which their defense hasn't been as great as everybody thought it would. They're still good, but it's not one that I'm necessarily too afraid to start against. And then in the playoffs, he gets Detroit, Jacksonville, and Seattle. So that's about as good as you're going to find. And he does have weapons. He has Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, the running backs. So I do expect him to at least be usable going forward with the potential of blow-up games like he had this week.
And to prepare for the playoffs for quarterbacks, also just if you're streaming quarterback, if these guys aren't available, go look at the quarterback you're starting now. If it's in that streamable tier, and see if they have any tough matchups in your playoffs. So it's usually weeks 15, 16, and 17. If they have a tough matchup in one of those weeks that you're not going to want to play them, go ahead and be ahead of the game and prepare. Go pick up a player who has a good matchup when your quarterback has a bad matchup. So if you have a tough matchup in week 16, you could find Jared Goff on the waivers and he gets Carolina. So make moves like that. We're getting to the point where we're pretty much 2 weeks out of the playoffs for most players, so you really don't need as much depth as you did at the beginning of the year. Rather, you can go ahead and start lining these players up, and we're gonna talk more about that as well. And so that leads me into the defenses. You want to pretty much be stacking up 2 defenses at this point. You need to be preparing for your matchups because defense is so reliant on matchups. If you don't have a defense who has a strong rest of season, like you're probably lining up the Eagles rest of season. If you don't have somebody like that, you need to be preparing ahead. And one of the best pickups is the Chiefs, and the reason is they get Cincinnati this week, so they're very likely to be dropped when your waivers run. And then the week after that, they get Denver. And then for the playoffs, Houston, Seattle, and Denver. So a great, all above average, great schedule, probably the best defensive schedule. And you can go scoop them up probably as soon as they're dropped, since they're playing Cincinnati. Another defense you could pick up is the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens have a great playoff schedule. Not sure if they're going to be available, but just go check because they get Denver, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Atlanta, and Pittsburgh for the rest of the season. So definitely go check if they're available. And just similar to what I was saying about quarterbacks, you need to, prepare for your matchups. And this is especially important for defense. So go check the defense you're rolling out right now. Maybe you have a good defense, but go check. Is there a matchup you're not going to want to play them? And go pick up a backup that you can just flip in for that week and be ahead of the game and prepare quicker than your league mates.
Yep. All right, so that leads us to our wide receivers. So our number 1 and 2 wide receiver pickups this week are going to be Zay Jones and Elijah Moore. So last week, we did suggest picking up any Jets receivers that you saw on the waiver wire due to a potential quarterback change. Turns out they did change, and Mike White was electric for them. Elijah Moore put up his best game of the year. Garrett Wilson put up another 30-point game. You love to see it. So for Zay Jones, they've actually started using him in a different role the past 2 games than what he was previously used in. And he's had 10 targets and 14 targets over the past 2 games, which is elite level amount of targets. And he's put up 14 and 29 PPR fantasy points. And both of those are without touchdowns. So I really like Zay Jones personally. He's getting targeted a ton. I do think Trevor Lawrence is an above average quarterback. I do actually like the Jags. I think they're better than what their record shows. And their schedule is really, really nice. So they get Detroit, great matchup. Tennessee, great matchup against the pass. They get Dallas, which Trayvon Diggs does shadow, but between him and Christian Kirk, I'm not sure who they'll think the number 1 is. So he might not shadow this game. He might just take a side of the field away. So I do think they can move him around so where he can be decent. And then they get the Jets and Houston, which, again, the Jets, they have Sauce Gardner, who does shadow again. So not sure how they're going to treat that. But then Houston in championship week is great. And then you go back to Elijah Moore, which, as I dictated when we talked about Mike White's schedule, he has a great schedule. So they get Minnesota, Buffalo, Detroit, Jacksonville, and Seattle. Most of these games should be high-scoring affairs, and I'm not really afraid of any of these defenses. So Elijah Moore, I do think, can be found on most waivers and can be a pretty decent flex go for the rest of the season. If you want to stash them and just wait and see how the next few games go, completely understand that. I would not necessarily throw him in my lineup this week, but this is a stash you need to have because we've seen him put up elite fantasy numbers before, and so he has that ability and can do it again.
Yep, and he's more of a stash to me because he's not seeing exactly the volume we want to see in the past couple of weeks, but he still is a really talented young player, and with getting this quarterback change and the play he was able to make, the big play, touchdown he was able to get, I think that he should see more of a role going forward, and he has a lot of upside, so definitely needs to be rostered and just see what happens in these 2 weeks before the playoffs and see if you want to line him up. All right, another move that you can make to prepare for your playoffs is to trade for these high upside running backs. And the 2 I'm going to say is Isiah Pacheco and Rachaad White. Both of these running backs are going to be affordable. You're going to be able to trade for them because they really haven't had explosive games yet, but they both have great matchups for the playoffs, and they both have a ton of upside as young players ascending roles in their offenses. And both are pretty good offenses. Pacheco, we've seen him get about half of the snaps in 3 straight weeks. He's gotten more and more fantasy points every week, and his playoff schedule is amazing. Week 15, the first week of the playoffs, he gets Houston. You're going to want to play him. Absolutely. Week 16, he's got Seattle, and week 17, Denver. So, 2 good weeks and then a pretty tough matchup, but a player that, as the season goes on, we've got 5 more games here that he really could run away with this role. And if you really are stuck at running back and your trade deadline hasn't hit yet, you could, trade for him, and he has a pretty good floor with his, rushing work as well as the upside of the amount of touchdowns that go around in that offense. Okay. The other running back you could trade for is Rachaad White, another great schedule and another player who's ascending in his offense. Even with, Leonard Fournette coming back, he has been the more efficient runner over the past 4 or 5 weeks, and he is pretty good in the passing game as well. And their playoff matchups, weeks 15 through 17, is Cincinnati, Arizona, and Carolina. So, again, great matchups, a player who you can get pretty affordably right now because of what he's produced so far, not being amazing, and with Leonard Fournette coming back. But he has that upside to really win you a league. And then Two more players you could trade for. Mark Andrews, he's had some down weeks and just has that explosive upside that we saw the beginning of this year and, the end of last year. Or the entirety of last year. He dropped a touchdown last week, but again, not many tight ends had the upside that Mark Andrews do, and it's been 4 pretty down weeks for Mark Andrews. I know one of them was due to injury, but he could be affordable at this point, but it might be difficult. So worth a shot. Another player who could definitely be a league winner that you could trade for if your trade deadline has not hit is Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper, not an amazing playoff schedule, but a middle-of-the-road one with Baltimore, New Orleans, and Washington. The difference here is that obviously he's getting a quarterback probably upgrade with Deshaun Watson, and he has been electric. He gets 2 home games, which he's been amazing in to start the playoffs. And even though he's probably a little bit expensive, I'm willing to pay up for a player with this amount of upside and this offensive situation that's happening.
Yep, I agree with all those, especially the rookie running backs. Look, this is what rookie running backs do. They take a while to get in, and then once they get in, they just explode, and they both are overtaking older running backs. So that's the typical thing you like to see from your rookie running back. Wait half the year and then take over, and that's exactly what they're both doing. Mark Andrews, like he said, pretty much 4 down weeks in a row, or down weeks for Mark Andrews. I mean, he's still hitting double-digit points. If this was any other tight end not named Travis Kelce, you would be ecstatic with his production. So go get him while you can, while people might be down on him. And then Amari Cooper, I agree. I love Amari Cooper. Deshaun Watson coming back. If he treats Amari Cooper like he did DeAndre Hopkins, look, I know DeAndre Hopkins is a better receiver, but quarterbacks have their targets that they just hyper-target every single game. If he does that and Amari starts getting 10 to 12 targets a game, look out. This could be a league winner. He could have top 5 upside. He's currently the wide receiver 7, and if you know his home road splits, which we've discussed in the past, he does better at home, and 2 of his 3 playoff matchups are at home. All right, so that leads us into our last topic, which are going to be handcuff running backs. Look, guys, if you have an elite running back or a workhorse running back on your team that if you said, hey, this guy goes down, I'm screwed, you go pick up their backup right now. Don't try to risk it. Don't wait it out. Just go ahead and pick up your insurance key and put them on your bench. You don't need that 5th or 6th wide receiver that you're never going to play. You don't need that backup tight end. You don't need that backup quarterback unless you're strategically waiting on a specific week to start them. That would be the only case there. But those dudes on your bench that you're never going to play, drop them and go pick up your handcuffs. These guys, for example, are going to be your Samaje Perines, which may be picked up right now just due to Joe Mixon missing.
Could be dropped.
If he gets dropped within the next few weeks, look for that. Pick him up. Alexander Madison, pick him up. A.J. Dillon. I know he's still pretty widely owned, but I've seen him on the waivers in a few of my own leagues for frustrated manager owners, so go pick him up. Jarrett McKinnon. If CH is on IR, if Isiah Pacheco goes down, McKinnon is the only guy they have, so pick him up. Hilliard for Tennessee. If Derrick Henry goes down, we've seen it before last year. He can succeed as the running back. Now, it's not as good as Derrick Henry, but it's at least starter worthy for your fantasy team. JaMychal Hasty for the Jags. If Travis Etienne gets hurt, which he just did, JaMychal Hasty looked more than capable to at least be a flex or better in your lineup if Etienne were to go down. Saquon Barkley, go pick up Matt Breida. Saquon does have an injury history, so if he goes down, he's getting a ton of work, so go pick up Breida. And the last one we're going to mention right now is going to be Keontae Ingram for the Arizona Cardinals. Right now, James Conner is getting an insane workload. I believe last game he had 92% of all running back opportunities, which includes catches and routes run and carries. So, and with his injury history, we know he has a problem staying healthy. So if he's touching the ball that many times, the likelihood of him getting hurt goes up. Keontae Ingram was a 6th-round rookie, but he has shown flashes. He's shown promise. The coaches really like him. And he's the last running back on our roster. They have Corey Clement on the practice squad. Other than that, we have just Keontae Ingram. So if James Conner were to go down, I think Keontae Ingram would inherit a lot of this work. And even though the Cardinals' offense hasn't looked as great as we thought it would, I mean, they're still not a terrible offense. They're still, say, top 10. And they'll still give opportunities for him to score once they get in the red zone.
Yep. So basically, we're at the last week of bye weeks, and you're not going to need these fill-in receivers like you mentioned anymore. So use those spaces wise. Pick up all these guys we talked about. Streaming quarterbacks if you need it, if you don't like the matchups. Streaming defenses, handcuff running backs, all these kind of things. It's a lot, high upside players are a lot better use on your bench right now. You don't need the depth that you did earlier in the year. So thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. That super helps us out. We're shooting for 500 subscribers. And leave a like, drop a comment. We answer all the comments and the questions. Thank you guys for tuning in. We have been the Fantasy Bros, and we are out.